Well, Miles the Monster certainly unleashed his wrath at Dover yesterday. For the first ever All Star race at the Monster Mile, let's just say, yikes. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Dover Motor Speedway, the 1 mile concrete oval. The fastest mile oval, I should say. Where Miles the Monster is just lurking in the shadows, waiting to unleash his wrath on his victims that take to his track and try to tame him. Even though we've talked about how strong of a track Darlington is and how tough it is to tame, it's sometimes tough to tame the Monster Mile in Dover because you don't know what he's going to do to you. Well, for this weekend with an exhibition race with $1 million at stake, we had a lot of things happen. Comers and goers, surprise runners, chaos, but somebody did come on top $1 million richer. Let's talk about all that happened in the All-Star race at Dover. Number 1, Hamlin victorious and $1 million rich. Denny Hamlin captured his second career NASCAR All-Star race by winning the first All-Star race held at Dover Motor Speedway yesterday, holding off his teammate Chase Briscoe, Eric Jones, Austin Dillon, and Connor Zilisch to take victory. This is, by the way, the third year in a row that Denny Hamlin has been victorious at the Monster Mile. The last 2 years, he did it in points-paying events. Of course, 2 years ago, we had that thrilling battle for the win towards the very end with Kyle Larson, where he was able to block whatever lane Larson was trying to use to try to close up the 11, but the 11 with arrow blocking being kind of the big factor and him being able to hold the lead, did what he needed to do to hold off Larson that day. And last year, he was able to benefit, especially with a late race rain shower that was eventually resumed after that shower passed by. He was able to best out his teammates and the Hendrick cars to take victory at the Monster Mile. And yesterday, he started the race on the pole after having a relatively good effort during the practice qualifying combined pit stop sequence that we had on Saturday, despite him spinning out on his get-up lap for his qualifying run. He was able to overcome that and still start on the pole. And he was very, very strong at the beginning of the race yesterday, despite some early chaos and late race chaos of segment number 1. Denny Hamlin showed that he had a rocket ship, especially on those long runs. Then when it came to segment number 2, the field was inverted where 1st through 26 would invert, where the person who finished first would restart 26, and the person that finished in 26 would start first for segment number 2. Well, there were some things that kind of hampered those decisions right there, especially with some key contenders being taken out. But regardless, Denny Hamlin, despite being able to restart mid-pack in segment number 2, it did not hurt him one bit because he was able to pass guys like crazy because, once again, good car in the long runs, and it handled well, and he was able to adapt to the racetrack, I feel like, better than most guys did. The 11 car was so strong being able to get up through the field, and he found himself back inside the top 5 by the end of segment number 2. And when they combined the average finish of all the drivers based on their segment 1 and segment 2 results, Hamlin was able to resurface to the top of the leaderboard for segment number 3. However, on the restarts, and I should also say at the start of the race, he lost the lead early on to Brad Keselowski. In segment number 3, when he restarted as the leader, he lost the lead to his teammate Chase Briscoe as well as the 45 of Tyler Reddick. Actually, it was Reddick that got the lead, but then Briscoe was able to get up there and challenge the 45 for a little bit. And then after we got into, once again, a long run, who shows up and comes to take the lead? None other than Denny Hamlin. That 11 car was super, super strong, being able to have good battles with his teammates. But even at times when he got into some lap traffic with guys running wounded out there, despite some repair work done, it would slow him down just a tiny bit, but then he'd get that advantage back eventually. Then after having a competition caution during lap 75 of the final segment that consisted of 200 laps, Hamlin was still able to hold his track position, and even then, he still had great battles with his teammate Chase Briscoe. It seemed like those were the two guys that, for the most part, had a grip on the racetrack as far as who was going to possibly be contending for the race win. But then we had a sequence of green flag pit stops towards the middle part of the final segment. A caution came out in the middle of it for Joey Logano wrecking, and pretty much some guys that were super strong and had a chance at top 5 got caught by the caution. Hamlin had not yet pitted as well as many others, so it didn't hurt him at all. And plus, with the amount of seconds that Denny Hamlin had over second place, it was not going to hurt him whatsoever. He came on pit road, solid stop, out he came in first place. But then he lost the lead to Chase Briscoe and once again had to wait for the long runs to come to him. And he was able to work the higher lane in the turns to be able to get closer and closer to Briscoe to the point where eventually he would get by Chase Briscoe with about 31 laps to go. And even though he took the lead, he didn't necessarily drive off. Briscoe was still able to keep tabs with him for some point towards the end, because I do feel like with the track conditions kind of cooling down with the sun kind of setting, it allowed Briscoe to kind of stay with the 11 car, and of course there was some lap traffic as well. But nonetheless, Denny Hamlin did not deal with the adversity from behind of Briscoe pressuring him, and he was able to bring it home in first place and win $1 million for him in the number 11 team. And I know, a non-points paying event, but you've seen how good and how consistent that Denny Hamlin has been this season. Yes, I know that his driver Tyler Reddick has won the most races, and he has one win less than the other guy who has multiple wins other than Reddick, being Chase Elliott. But Denny Hamlin, I think you could say he is one of the top 5 drivers right now that has a really good shot at this championship. And again, we've talked about it multiple times, and I feel like I'm putting on repeat right here. But Denny Hamlin, can he pull through at the very end of the season in that last race at Homestead and become a NASCAR champion at long last? That's for him, his pit crew, his crew chief, and his race team to decide whether or not they're going to put together consistent races and consistent results to win the championship. We have to wait and see. But once again yesterday, Denny Hamlin showed that he's still one of the top drivers right now, and even in a non-points event, he was the man yesterday, and you cannot deny that was a team effort for him and the number 11 team. So congrats to Denny Hamlin, 2-time All-Star winner. Number 2, so close for Briscoe. Chase Briscoe was just one spot shy of winning $1 million at yesterday's All-Star race at Dover. And Briscoe, for the most part, yesterday had a very good race car and being able to run up towards the front of the field. He pretty much was top 5, top 10 most of the day. Aside from the inverted segment number 2 that flipped the field around, Briscoe was also able to work his way through the pack because of how good of a race car he had. And for the most part, the Joe Gibbs cars had speed this weekend for some of their guys. Well, the other half had some issues, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But Chase Briscoe yesterday showed that he had the speed to compete with Denny Hamlin and Tyler Reddick and some of those guys in the early part of a run after a green flag restart. But then after we get into a long run, his car would begin to fade. I noticed in the beginning of the final segment where Briscoe took the lead briefly, and then when he lost the lead because we were getting to a long run and he was complaining about his tires are really worn to the cords and he felt like he wasn't going to be able to make it, he dropped back waiting for that competition caution to come at lap 75 of the final segment. He was nearly 10 seconds behind the leaders when that competition yellow came out. But he was able to gain some track position on pit road because the 19 team was on their marks. He was able to get back up at the front of the field and contend with Hamlin and Reddick. Then it became the Hamlin and Briscoe battle pretty much for the rest of the race. After that late yellow for Joey Logano's wreck, Briscoe's team was able to get him another good pit stop and get him second off pit road. And 2 turns into that final restart, he was able to take the lead from Denny Hamlin. And it looked like maybe if they have adjusted to the car, Briscoe could be able to hold him off. That unfortunately was not the case, as once again Hamlin kept stalking him and eventually took the lead from him with 31 to go and pretty much was Denny Hamlin's race till then. But once again, as I mentioned, Briscoe did not let Denny Hamlin get too far away. He was able to stay in touch with him, especially if a late race yellow happened. Who knows what could have happened in the very end? Maybe Briscoe could have been victorious, considering how good he was on the short runs and good on restarts. Denny Hamlin may have not won $1 million yesterday, but it didn't happen, and he had to settle for second place and only get $100,000. But it's another good run for the 19 team, even in a non-points event. The last couple of races, the 19 team's been trying to find their form because they've been off to a little bit of a rocky start this year, like they were last year, but I feel like maybe slightly below this year. But I've got a good feeling now as we're getting close into the summer that Chase Briscoe and the 19 team are going to shine again. They're going to get back to victory lane, and they're going to get more wins and more good results. That's going to get them higher and higher into the points. As mentioned, they're right now one spot out of trying to make the chase, but I got a feeling they're not going to be there for long. So despite coming up short of $1 million yesterday, Chase Briscoe, he's still one of the top dogs right now, and he did a great job yesterday. Number 3, surprise efforts by Jones and Zilisch. While Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe were duking out for the win, the 2 other stars of the day that I was thoroughly impressed with was Eric Jones of Legacy Motor Club coming home in the 3rd spot And Connor Zilisch, the only rookie in the Cup Series this year for Trackhouse Racing, finishing in 5th spot. Those two really showed yesterday that they truly can compete with the top dogs if they're given really good race cars. Eric Jones in the 43 team yesterday had a relatively good race car. Now, he was one of the guys that had to qualify for the final segment of the All-Star race with average finish of the first two segments. And the 43 team showed a lot of speed that he was able to beat within the top 10 to 12 of those first two segments and was able to have that average finish allow him to advance into the final segment of the All-Star race. And when he was able to be in that final segment, he at times on long runs also was running down a lot of those leaders up at the front of the field. When we saw Reddick and Briscoe and Hamlin duking it out for the lead, you would see Eric Jones begin to creep in and get in the mix. That 43 car had some ponies on the long runs. Now, short runs, again, I think were their Achilles heel, but once again, the 43 team on the long runs had some really good competitive speed, being able to race against the likes of those Gibbs cars, 2311 cars, Hendrick Motorsports cars. That's a big step for Legacy Motor Club. Has had kind of a down year this year. And I know a lot of you are probably saying, well, they haven't really had the resources to compete with these big teams the last couple of years. And I get that. But I would have expected a little more from the 43 car as well as the 42 of John Hunter Nemechek this year. But Jones yesterday did a really good job at Dover Motor Speedway. A 3rd place result. You got to feel pretty happy about that. Then we have Connor Zilisch, the rookie, who had a chance to get into the show with average finish, which he did that. He was one of the 5 guys that was eligible for the fan vote to get in, but based off of average finish, he didn't need that fan vote, and he was able to transfer into the final segment. And that 88 car also had a really good long run pace. I mean, this is the first time on an oval track this year that we've seen Trackhouse Racing with Connor Zilisch driving have the speed to go up towards the front and race with these top teams. I haven't seen it from Zilisch all year long because, once again, a guy that has definitely got a lot of promise and has a bright future in NASCAR is still getting adapted to these next-gen cars aside from the O'Reilly cars where he was so dominant last year. He's had a little bit of a tough time adapting to the next-gen race cars this year. But the last couple of weeks, a 16th place at Texas after qualifying top 15 isn't too bad. How strong he was at Watkins Glen last week, running up at the front, having a chance to win, if not get a top 5, but have the right front tire issue late in the race where he had to pit, but was able to get a 20th place out of it. To see him run up front yesterday was very, very encouraging, not just for himself, but also for the Trackhouse Racing team, which has stepped down as far as their performance this year. Yesterday was a good step in the right direction. Now, I will say Connor Zilisch, I think, might have had a chance at Denny Hamlin Chase Briscoe, but when we had the competition caution at lap 75 of the final segment and everybody came down and pitted, he got penalized for equipment interfering with someone else's pit stop, and thus Zilisch had to restart at the back of the field. And I felt like there's no way he's going to be able to recover from this. He wasn't able to recover and have a chance for the win, but he was able to claw his way back inside the top 10 and then got inside the top 5 at the very end and got a 5th place result. Despite that big mistake on pit road, there's promise for the 88 team at Zilisch going forward with that strong run, with that fast race car, with being able to overcome adversity and get a top 5. Gotta feel pretty good about themselves. Let's see how they can carry this momentum going forward in these points-paying events coming up. And I don't think they're going to qualify for the chase at all. I think he's still trying to find form in every way, shape, or form, but those were positive signs yesterday that I saw from Zilisch. So a big shout out to Jones and Zilisch. Great runs yesterday. Number 4, All-Star Chaos. The All-Star race, with the non-points event that it is, can sometimes provide a lot of hectic, chaotic moments in its racing format, and yesterday was no different. 2 laps into the race, lap number 2, on the front straightaway, we had our first big incident of the race, where it looked like Ryan Preece made a mistake coming down a little too early with Todd Gilliland to his inside when they were nearly running 3 wide down the front straightaway. Ryan Preece comes down into Todd Gilliland, gets out of control, and goes into the pack collecting a lot of cars, including Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott. Now, Larson and Blaney, with the rules of this All-Star race, could go back to the garage and repair their cars. Ellie didn't suffer a whole lot of damage in that incident, was still able to continue on. However, a lot of guys that needed to get in based on their average finish or at least have a chance at the fan vote were taken out, including Ryan Preece, with the rear of his car catching on fire the fuel exhaust system. I think that's the first time I've ever seen that in the next-gen car. But thankfully, nobody was hurt, but Ryan Preece's day was over. Then after a late race yellow in segment 1, where Carson Hocevar had a right front go down and hit the wall in 4, it brought the yellow and brought a lot of cars down pit road to get some tires so they can maybe improve their average finishing position of segment 1 in preparation for segment 2. But just as that was going on with a lot of jockeying in the middle of the pack, all of a sudden Riley Herbst gets out of control loose coming off of turn 4 with 2 laps left in the first segment, goes around the pack and collects a lot of cars, including Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, John Hunter Nemechek, and many, many more. And you had 2 more top dogs in Elliott and Bell taken out in that incident, though Bell was able to repair the car for the final segment. Elliott was unfortunately done for the day and not even able to take part in that last segment. Then in segment number 2, another incident transpired where, down the back straightaway, Ross Chastain had a big run on the top of the racetrack in turn 2 with Brad Keselowski on the inside, and it looked like Chastain is slightly coming down as they're coming off corner exit. They both go around and tangle, and unfortunately collected another good race car in Bubba Wallace in that incident, where the splitter was damaged to the point that Bubba had to go back to the garage and repair his car, and Brad Keselowski had to go repair the rear of the car. Chastain, with the left front damage he sustained, was done for the day. A lot of that chaos really took out a lot of good race cars that were already guaranteed a spot into the final segment of the race, where the first 2 segments for the guys locked in didn't necessarily matter, even though average finishing position of those first 2 segments kind of mattered. Them being in the final segment was what really mattered for them. But unfortunately, with a lot of damage that some of them sustained, not a lot of those guys, only Elliott and Chastain, were not able to return to the racetrack. The other guys were, but not a lot of them were competitive. Aside from Brad Keselowski being able to get back and finish 10th of that damage repair was relatively impressive. And I also forgot, Kyle Busch was also a part of the incidents as well, which is a shame because the last couple of weeks we've seen the 8 car have some pretty good speed out of the race cars. It was that end of segment 1 incident that he got caught up in on the straightaway, so that kind of sucked for Kyle Busch. But he also had a pit penalty that put him back there in position, and unfortunately, with that penalty, he ended up in the chaos. But a lot of wrecks took out a lot of guys yesterday. And number 5, the All-Star format and the racing. Let me just say this first about the racing. Let me get that out of the way. Let me get the good out of the way. The racing. I thought it was relatively good racing yesterday for the 750 horsepower package, the softer tire, with Resident being put on the track, not PJ1. We saw a lot of comers and goers throughout the race yesterday, and there were some passing opportunities. So I was thoroughly encouraged with what I saw, and hopefully it means better things to come for Dover Motor Speedway in the near future, whether it be a points race or non-points race. With that all being said, the All-Star format yesterday, how it all shaped out is it was a 350-lap race with it divided up into 3 segments. Segments 1 and 2, each 75 laps. Final segment, 200 laps with the lap 75 competition caution. And the first 2 segments, as mentioned, if you were in the top 26 at the end of segment number 1, they would determine your average finishing position and would determine the invert and where you start for segment number 2, and then after segment number 2, when that's all complete, they combine the average finish of all the cars from the 36 that competed in those first 2 segments and determine which drivers would be eligible to go to the final segment, plus the fan vote winner. Well, with all the chaos that we had yesterday that took out some guys that were already locked in and couldn't get back in the race whatsoever, and allowed a couple other guys that needed to get in on average finish to advance, and the fan vote, which went to Daniel Suarez of Spire Motorsports. So here's what I'm going to say. I was not a fan of the All-Star format whatsoever yesterday. They should not have got rid of the open race, which is what we normally have for guys that are not locked in the All-Star race. Let them have their own race. Determine who gets into the main event to race for $1 million. Don't include the guys that are already locked in because they're former All-Star winners, former NASCAR champions, guys that have won last year, and guys that have already won this year. That was not a good decision by NASCAR, especially for this type of track with Dover, especially when it's a slippery racetrack with concrete and they're sliding all over the track and everything, and anything can happen at any given moment of the racetrack. It was not a good decision, I think, by NASCAR to have the guys already locked into the main segment race those first 150 laps of the first 2 segments combined. I thought that was a really bad decision. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, folks. Dover should not be the home of the All-Star race. It should go back to either Charlotte, or we should maybe swap out the spring Bristol race and make that the All-Star race, because It really does not work, I feel like, for Dover Motor Speedway. Again, the racing wasn't bad yesterday, but the format that determined the All-Star race just, it was not good. I just really do not like the format for the Dover All-Star race at all yesterday. We should go back to Charlotte at least and give it another go, because I feel like what we've seen with this car with 750 horsepower and a little less rear diffuser, that we can have some relatively good racing on these races that could help the All-Star race product. I mean, the Charlotte, the mile and a half tracks have been better with this next-gen car, but maybe putting the All-Star race at Charlotte for the All-Star race would certainly be pretty good. I mean, we did try it with Texas a couple years ago, but it wasn't really that entertaining. We had North Wilkesboro the past 3 years. They were relatively fun, but the first year with the surface, was just relatively bad. Then we had the repave, and it made it somewhat better, especially with the softer compound tire. But I think for Dover, we should not have the All-Star race here. We should have a points race here, because, once again, with the racing that we had, we can have a points race here at Dover, and it can put on a good show for the fans. And it was brought up during the broadcast yesterday that Dover Motor Speedway is not going anywhere, aside from some speculation it could be taken off the schedule. It was said by Mike Joy on Fox that Dover Motor Speedway is still part of NASCAR's schedule. Now, once again, is it going to be a points race next year, or is it going to be the All-Star race? I think it needs to go back to a points race next year and moving forward, and we need to try the All-Star race somewhere else, like Charlotte or Bristol, perhaps. Or maybe another racetrack that is willing to, throw their money at NASCAR and say, hey, we'll host the All-Star race. We'll give it a try. It doesn't necessarily have to be a track that we go to for points-paying events. It could be another one of the short tracks, perhaps. I mean, not Bowman Gray Stadium. I mean, I don't think we're going to have to clash there next year, perhaps. But just maybe branch out and try something new next year at a different track. Dover should be a points race, not the All-Star race. The racing product, again, was good. The format was not so good. And also, I'd like to give a quick shout-out to NASCAR on Fox as they've concluded their Cup Series coverage for 2026. And I want to thank Mike Joy, Kevin Harvick, and Clint Boyer for their efforts this year. By the way, shout out to Mike Joy, who waved the green flag for the All-Star race yesterday, which that was pretty cool to see. One of the most iconic voices of NASCAR being able to wave the green flag. The first time he's ever done it, he said. So that was a really cool moment to see Mike wave the green flag for the race yesterday. But that will conclude Fox's coverage of the season for Cup Series. Truck Series will still be covered by Fox and FS1 for the rest of the year. But I want to thank everybody at NASCAR on Fox for the work that they put in this year. I know some people can be a little bit critical of Fox, but I will give them props on certain things. I think the scoreboard that they made for this year was really, really crafty and creative. And again, I applaud them for the races that we had green flag action. They went side by side where we were still able to see the racing action. Even as they were airing commercials, we could see what was going on. And normally, they would do this in the past when we get closer to the end of the race. They did it for every race this year, no matter when we went under commercial break and there was green flag action going on. They would show the race on one side of the screen while showing commercials on the other side. So I applaud Fox for that decision. I think they did a great job with that, and it should be like that going forward from here on out, with them still having the contract rights for the first 12 races of the year, plus the Clash and the All-Star race and the dual races. So thank again to Fox and NASCAR together for their efforts for 2026. And next weekend, Prime Video is back for 5 races. And I know a lot of people wish it could be more than 5 races, but we have to cherish the 5 weeks that we have with Prime Video, because they knocked out of the park their first year last year. They did a great job with the broadcast, with the announcers, and the product that they put together. And I just am really appreciative of their efforts for the race product that they brought last year covering the races. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do going forward for these next 5 weekends. And we're looking forward to hearing Adam Alexander, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Steve Letarte, and the rest of the gang for these next 5 weekends. So, with that being said, we are ready for one of NASCAR's prestigious events, the Coca-Cola 600, the longest race on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. 600 miles, 400 laps, a weekend of remembrance where we honor the men and women that served in our military that unfortunately were never able to return home. They may be gone, but their impact on our country and serving our military will never be forgotten whatsoever. And next weekend, we will honor them, and we honor all Americans, and we will race for 600 miles, 400 laps next weekend. It's going to be a very fun weekend. It'll be my 4th time attending this historic race. I can't wait for it. Hopefully, no rain impacts it because there's a slight chance, but hopefully it does not happen whatsoever. But I'm looking forward to being there next weekend. There will be no double attempt this year by Kyle Larson, by the way, but there will be one driver that I will bring up next weekend that will be doing the double for the Coke 600 and the Indianapolis 500. So I'm looking forward to that. And also, I'm going to be at the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race Friday night for the North Carolina Education Lottery 200 to watch these guys race 200 miles on a Friday night to kick off Memorial Day weekend. So who's going to come out top ahead of the Coke 600 next weekend? We shall see. It'll be a fun race, I can guarantee that. But I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Denny Hamlin and the number 11 team winning yesterday's All-Star race at Dover. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing!